Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I want to summarise this bill by borrowing a phrase from Senator Whish-Wilson, who uttered it, I think, a couple of years ago. I don't normally see Senator Whish-Wilson's phrases containing accuracy, but this one is accurate. This bill is like a dog revisiting its own vomit.
Oh, I was here when
The Treasury Laws Amendment, the government calls it the Prohibiting Energy Market Misconduct Bill, should really be the government's We Failed Bill. It is proof of failed governance, and it vindicates all that we've been saying about energy and climate for the last 3 years. Yet the government touts it as a big stick to protect users. That is a lie. It is another Liberal Nationals facade. Energy prices are ridiculous, and it's of the government's own making. When large companies, as we see today, need help and are crying out for help, it's really saying something. Aluminium smelters were built in the state of New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia, because of our cheap coal-fired electricity. They are now shutting. They have shut. Now more are shutting. Large industries are crying for relief. Food processing is crying for relief. Fodder growers are crying for relief from electricity bills. Families are crying for relief from electricity bills. Before going into the detail, Madam Acting Deputy President, I want to talk about the primacy of energy. The primacy of energy. In the Industrial Revolution, which started around about 1850, we have seen an ever-relentless decrease in real prices of energy. That has driven the material development of Western civilization and now civilization around the world. When energy becomes cheaper, productivity increases. When productivity increases, wealth increases. When wealth increases, we have much more ability to do the things that people want to do and need us to do. And the environment improves. It is a well-known fact that high productivity leads to wealth, leads to improved environmental outcomes. I also want to talk about the market we had in this country under what is known as competitive federalism in our Constitution. It meant that if any one state was sloppy on its electricity prices, raised electricity prices, or didn't deliver reliability, then businesses, families moved to other states. We've seen that in South Australia recently. We've seen businesses leaving South Australia, but we haven't seen South Australia wake up. We've seen the Greens driving South Australia downhill, Labor Party piling on, and especially in the form of Jay Weatherill, the Liberal Party, Senator Bernardi, Centre Alliance, all piling on. Why? Because South Australia has been bailed out by the other states, especially Western Australia. It's no longer competitive federalism in this country, it is competitive welfareism. And now we have Victoria following South Australia's leads. We have Queensland under the Palaszczuk government threatening to follow South Australia's lead. It's a mess. Employers have bailed on South Australia, and now employers, you watch, will bail on Victoria in the near future. And so that means companies are now looking to go overseas. And well, they need to, because that's where they're getting competitive energy prices. Brickworks, a major Australian company, talking about moving to America. And it's not the only one. Others are talking about it. So let's go through the government's glossy brochure on this bill, the We Failed bill. It talks about retail pricing prohibition, requiring, quote, retailers to pass on sustained and substantial reductions in costs to consumers. That is meaning the market has failed. Secondly, it talks about contract liquidity prohibition, penalises generators that withhold electricity contracts for the purpose of substantially lessening market competition. That means it's not a market, it is a racket. The government talks about wholesale prohibition. It says, quote, bans generators from manipulating the spot market, for example, by withholding supply to inflate prices. That means the market has failed. On and on and on. Watch them get around all these civil penalties. Then we talk about contracting orders. The government talks about contracting orders. If recommended by the ACCC, the Treasurer can require a generator to offer contracts to third parties for up to 3 years. The market has failed, Madam Acting Deputy President. Divestiture orders are another gamble from the government. If recommended by the ACCC, the Treasurer can apply to the Federal Court to force a company to sell an asset or assets to an unrelated third party. What happened to free enterprise? The Liberal national parties have become bastions of socialism. Governments allocating the means and resources of production. Did you know, this is a question from the government, did you know that the ACCC found retail margins more than doubled between 2007-8 and 2017-18? 1 decade, retail margins doubled. Under the Liberal Labor Nationals policies over the last 15-20 years, starting primarily with John Howard's Liberal government, Liberal Nationals government. The ACCC has the power to obtain, the government says, information from retailers about their costs, including the cost of complying, quote, complying with green schemes, environmental costs. Sounds like the Murray-Darling Basin again. And then we see the government says the ACCC will choose the most appropriate remedy for the size of the wrongdoing. More bureaucracy, more socialism. Then we see the government, we read here, the government says, where a company known as a gentailer, there's a new term, a gentailer, owns both generation and retail services, it might be tempted to withhold contracts to drive up prices or gain an advantage in the retail market. Socialism has failed. The legislation penalises generators that refuse to offer electricity contracts for the purpose of substantially lessening competition. Regulations caused this. Then the government goes on and says there are good reasons why a generator may not enter into contracts with rival retailers. For example, hello, listen to this one. Intermittent generators like wind farms and solar are unable to sell supply contracts because they can't be certain they can produce the generation when it is needed. This kind of behaviour is not prohibited, but it's common sense. We told them this would happen with solar and wind. And then the government talks about prohibited conduct, electricity spot market, basic case. Basic case. I'll get onto the aggravated case later. It says a corporation contravenes this section if the corporation bids or offers to supply electricity in relation to an electricity spot market, or fails to bid or offer to supply electricity in relation to an electricity spot market, and the corporation does so fraudulently, dishonestly, or in bad faith, or for the purpose of distorting or manipulating prices in that electricity spot market. This is the Liberal, Nationals, Labor, Greens market for electricity in this country. Destroying farmers, destroying industry, destroying exports. Let's go on, though, because this is an essential service that has failed under this government, Liberal Labor duopoly governance. So we go on to section 153H, prohibited conduct, big capital letters, electricity spot market, aggravated case. A corporation contravenes this section if the corporation bids or offers to supply electricity in relation to an electricity spot market, or fails to bid or offer to supply electricity in relation to an electricity spot market, and the corporation does so fraudulently, dishonestly, or in bad faith for the purpose of distorting or manipulating prices in the electricity spot market. This is the market, supposedly, that Liberal, Labor, National, Greens have concocted over the last 15, 20 years. It's not a market, it is a racket, a bureaucratic racket. It is socialism that has failed. Then we see basic cases. Basic cases. If you get two basic cases, they become an aggravated case. Again, market failing. This is the Liberal Labor government admitting failure. The dreamers on the Labor Party still won't own up. At least the Liberal Party, although it didn't know it, has owned up. They have created this mess. And we see people like Queensland, the Labor government up there, to prevent forced... Listen to this. This is coming from a Liberal government. Liberal national government. To prevent forced privatisation, government-owned businesses will be provided the opportunity to divest to another business owned by the same government that is considered to be in genuine competition with the business. Anastasia Palaszczuk's government owns the generators in Queensland. No competition. She had competition before because she competed with New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria. Now it's gone. There is no competition. And the Labor Party in Queensland milks the taxpayers in Queensland for all they're worth, or rather the electricity users and businesses in Queensland for $1.4 going to $1.6 billion a year. And this happens because policy on energy is based on a lie, And that leads to a bigger scam, which is the energy scam, the energy racket. And Mr. Angus Taylor knows this. He knows from his farming business what is going on in this country. We need to bring back competitive federalism. Socialism has failed. You created this mess with regulation. Now you're trying to fix it with regulation, more complex, with onerous sets of more regulations. That adds more cost and employs more bureaucrats, more lawyers, more socialism, government control and allocation of the means of production. It could be Lenin leading you lot. We told them solar and wind are not sustainable, not economic. They added subsidies that Australians are paying for with their jobs, not just their wallets. We told them solar and wind are not reliable. They ignored us. Now they claim that this will ensure solar and wind generators that are not reliable will be hit with a reliability penalty and add to prices. What is going on in this country? I could talk about Kilcoy, where governments are subsidising the proposed installation of the largest solar panel in the Southern Hemisphere, destroying 10 kilometres of a mountain range, destroying the productive capacity of productive farmland, valuable farmland, raising electricity prices, killing industries, and subsidising the Chinese to do it because they will be building this solar farm, this solar industrial complex. Prime Minister John Curtin, a Labor leader, when the Japanese bombed Darwin, he did not send them a cheque saying you'll need to pay for the bombs. But that's what we're doing with the Chinese. We're paying for them to destroy our energy. Meanwhile, they'll take our coal and they will build cheap wind turbines with it. They'll build cheap solar panels with it, and then we'll pay them subsidies to install it and run it. What is going on? Minister Taylor knows that farmers have lost their property rights to the Howard Liberal Nationals government working with the Borbidge National Party government in 1996, and in 1998 the Beattie Labor government in Queensland and the Carr Labor government in New South Wales. Minister Taylor has first-hand experience of the damage to farming and the pain to farmers. Liberal National Party MPs know that climate change is crap, it is rubbish. It is really climate variability. That is just going through cycles. Yet this lie has been perpetuated. This afternoon we heard Senator McKenzie telling us that the Nats are committed to pushing this, committed to climate action. The sad thing is they are, and it's destroying us. Look at them hanging their heads in shame. The Liberals say they're working on it, climate change, while they're trying to do as little as possible, yet still the people pay the high prices. Industry pays the price. Families pay with unemployment. Farmers pay with going out of business. Labor senators say they're working on it, yet the people smashed them for it 5 months ago. The root cause is that energy policy under the Liberal Labor Nats has followed the Greens, who are implementing the UN's agenda, now known as Agenda 2030, previously known as Agenda 21, and Senator Pauline Hanson has rightly been calling that out for 23 years. It's an agenda for central global governance, as the UN bureaucrats have admitted many times. In 2004, Madam Acting Deputy President, it was written into the Greens policy and written into the policy agenda of the ALP. Liberal Nats pushed it. Ask Senator Robert Hill, who drove it. Queensland LNP has successfully passed a motion, or several motions I believe, certainly two, maybe three, banning their federal MPs from enacting Agenda 21. They passed that in 2013 and 2015. Does the name Smead mean anything to you? Does the name Noosa branch mean anything to you? Does the Wide Bay branch mean anything to you? They drove this right through the state. Have a look at the Greens' policies today, aimed at 2030 to comply with the UN's agenda. The UN's agenda is unelected global socialist governance. The Liberal Nats are socialists, hell-bent on regulating everything centrally and ultimately in accord with UN treaties, protocols, agenda, agreements, declarations, like the 1972 UN Lima Declaration that Labor Prime Minister Gough Whitlam signed in 1975 and Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser ratified the following year, like the 1992 UN Rio Declaration, which gave birth to UN Agenda 21, now known as 2030, like the 1996 UN Kyoto Protocol that drove John Howard's Liberal National Party government to steal farmers' property rights against the Constitution with no compensation, like the 2015 UN Paris Agreement that President Donald Trump has just pulled America out of. We ask you again, pull Australia out of the Paris Agreement. It continues, like the control of property, the control of energy, the control of water. The UN admits it. Under water, for example, UNEA, which stands for the United Nations Environmental Assembly. It says of itself, quote, in May, countries will meet in Nairobi for UNEA, United Nations Environmental Assembly, 2, the world's de facto parliament for the environment. Not my words, UN words, to discuss how the United Nations Environment Programme can deliver on the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Not my words, the UN's words. And they claim credit in the article for installing water trading in Australia to control water, quantities and prices. Look it up. The article from UNEA is entitled Development of Water Trading in Australia. They take the credit for it because it's all based on a lie, the climate lie, the UN's climate lie, and it's embedded at the heart of Liberal, Labor, Greens, Nationals policies based on UN dictates and lies, with the Greens leading the charge as the UN's useful idiots, despite wrecking our nation and hurting our people. And there's an underlying philosophical problem. The UN Greens' goal is to keep nature as it is, untouched. Our goal is human happiness. Animals affect the environment. Humans are no different. Yet, we are the only species that has the ability to know when it is hurting the environment, and the only species with the intelligence and the care to minimise our impact. The Greens say we must choose between the environment or civilisation. According to the Greens and the UN, they're mutually exclusive, and they're brainwashing the kids to choose one or the other. We say that is nonsense. We say the environment and civilisation both need each other. They're mutually dependent. The future of civilisation depends on protecting the environment today. The future of the environment depends upon making sure we have a civilisation that is healthy. The UN Greens approach is anti-human. Our approach is pro-human. We are happy when people are happy. So we've seen that regulation begets regulation. It's just Band-Aids on Band-Aids on Band-Aids. That adds cost. Canberra's workforce is growing. It is the wealthiest town with the highest growth in Australia. Lawyers, bureaucrats. That's not productive capacity. It is destroying productive capacity. The rest of the country, while Canberra grows, the rest of the country is putting up shutters. Just go anywhere in the bush. Our productive capacity is being destroyed, smashed, killed. So, I grit my teeth, Madam Acting Deputy President. This situation is almost hopeless. Yet most MPs don't even see the problem. I grit my teeth because we must support this legislation to close the exploitation that Liberal Labor has designed into their duopoly's energy policies. The real and honest solution, Mr Taylor, is to tell the truth on climate and to get back to policy based on solid data and facts. Let the cheapest generator prevail in a level playing field. I want to commend Craig Kelly, who questions the Bureau of Meteorology for its lies on climate, its distortions, and who is working diligently to turn the ship around. I want to compliment Senator Rennick, for questioning the Bureau of Meteorology. And I want to acknowledge Maurice Newman, former international banker and head of the Australian Stock Exchange, who has said the same and exposed the UN's desire for control openly and publicly. Energy primacy, water primacy, property rights primacy. We will restore the productive capacity of our beautiful country.
Thank you, Senator Roberts.